This is the Rich Dad StockCast with Andy Tanner, the show that kicks 401ks in the asphalt and teaches you to be the master of your own stock investing domain. And here's your host, Greg Arthur.
Okay, welcome to the show. We got another great show with our good friend Andy Tanner. This show is probably going to be called Arm Wrestling in the Stock Market.
Yeah.
The topic of this show actually came from the comments. Stephan Shapiro, he wrote, I read so many conflicting forecasts and data about the economy continuing boom or going bust. I have a case of analysis paralysis, which that's terrible because you can't take advantage of what's going on. So what we need is a little bit of help from our friend Andy Tanner so Stephan doesn't have analysis paralysis and can start taking advantage of what's going on and make some money with the stock market. So Andy, help Stephan, please.
You know, what can I help? I don't know if I'm much help. All I am for this episode is an overgrown Boy Scout, and that is literal. I am an overgrown Boy Scout. And when I got my Eagle Award, they do an Eagle Court, and they have a theme that says always an Eagle. So for the rest of your life, they expect you to live those things. And the scouting has an oath that you take about, personal cleanliness and mentally strong and, mentally awake. And I think they call it morally straight. I struggle with all three of those every day. I think they have a slogan. It's called Do a Good Turn Daily. I think we do a little better job of that one than the first one.
That's a good one.
But the motto is probably the most important one that has stuck with me. And it's called Be Prepared. And I think the best way to address that fabulous question, by the way, and thank you to the viewer that sent that in, is we're going to talk a little bit about the difference in the role of predicting what's going to happen and preparing for what may happen, and find the balance there that I feel can be beneficial to everyone. So overgoing Boy Scout, we're going to talk about being prepared.
Hey, quick question. When you say predicting the future or being prepared for the future, could you sum that up with investing through capital gains and investing through cash flow? Or am I oversimplifying this?
No, I mean, I think that's certainly a component to it. I tend to like to lean towards cash flow, but even that can be unpredictable, right? Give you an example. Marcy and I are known as stock people, but we have some real estate syndications, for example, in Texas, and we've got frozen pipes, and there's 100-year storm down there, and whether we'll get a rent check or a syndication check, or it's called a distribution, whether we'll get the full distribution, some of the distribution, none of the distribution, well, that's going to depend on the damage. So even cash flow can be damaged. And welcome to investing. Andy's a rich dad advisor. He'd never have anything bad happen to him. He makes all the right decisions. He can see the future. Well, I don't think anyone saw a 100-year freeze coming to Texas. The planet's supposed to be getting warmer, not colder. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know how that stuff works, but the fact of the matter is my cash flow may or may not, we'll find out to the degree the damage is done. Those are big projects down there, and hundreds and hundreds of units, so it could be expensive.
To bring that to stocks, even dividends, a company can change the percentage they do.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
If their fortune, it's like, if you really look at business, real estate, and stocks, they're really all the same to me. They all have a balance sheet, they all have customers, they all have to offer value at some point, right? So they're really all businesses. And we just put them in different categories, but they really are all businesses. Well, if something unforeseen happens, there's so many risks. There's legislative risks, there's geographic risks, which was, if you take a geographic risk in Florida, you're saying, well, we're going to grow oranges. That's a good geography for that. They have a 100-year freeze. That geographic risk comes into play, right? Legislative risk. Oh, we're going to ban, this type of automobile now, and everyone's got to go green. Or there's obsolescence risk. I'm a truck driver. Now we have a self-driving car. So there are thousands of risks, and that's why we teach risk management. So this is going to be a great discussion. And maybe the way I'd frame it, Greg, is let's say you and I decide we're going to take our families to the beach together. You say, Andy, let's go meet in Hawaii. COVID's winding down. Maybe we can get somewhere without quarantine. We're due for Hawaii. A lot of pent up demand, in my opinion. There, I know I'm ready to go. And we're down in Honolulu or probably Maui or the Big Island, whatever one we choose. And we say, all right, let's go to the beach. Now in Hawaii, two things can happen. It rains a lot too. And so there could be sun or there could be rain. So we would have a research portion of what we do. We're going to try and predict the future. So we go to a meteorologist and we say, hey, based on what you know, sun or rain, which one? And he'd give us a forecast maybe for sun. But if we take the idea that our success is going to be about predicting the future, and we don't take an umbrella, right? Or we don't take a sweater in case it changes, we haven't engaged in risk management. So we certainly are going to encourage, this guy says, or gal, I don't know if it was a man or a woman, says, Stephan. So he says, hey, I've got paralysis of analysis. I'm tired of looking at this because I can't get a forecast. I look here and there's storm clouds, and I look here and there's sunshine, and it looks like either one could happen. I'm paralyzed. How do I act? And there is a context that I believe is less effective of seeking to get to a point of surety. This is very important. We will look at the meteorologists when we're in Hawaii, and we will look at the forecast. But if we ever say, "Oh, we've come to a point of surety," we're not gonna be well prepared. And so the idea is to certainly do your fundamental analysis, do your technical analysis, do your economic analysis, do all that analysis. But if you think the purpose of doing that analysis is get to a point of surety, that's incorrect. I'll tell you what I believe is correct. The analysis, what it does give you is possibilities. Oh, there's a 50% chance of rain, 50% chance of sun. Oh, we have two possibilities. Now, once I know what the possibilities are, I can prepare for both. And I'll tell you what, why don't we do this, Greg? It's 40% rain, 60% sun. Let's take suntan lotion for the 60% sun scenario. Let's bring an umbrella and a sweater for the 60% rain, and bring some things that we can do under an umbrella, a book, read, enjoy. We'll bring some beach stuff for well, our kids are too old to play at the beach, but you know what I'm saying. So the context I would submit is we're going to do fundamental technical analysis, economic analysis to say, well, what are the possibilities? And we'll get into those in a little more detail maybe here in the show. And then once we see what those are, we flip from trying to seek predictive powers to say, well, I'm sure this is what's going to happen. Now I can place my money here with confidence. And we can say, well, let's see how we might prepare for the most likely scenarios, several of which may come to pass. So I'm an overgrown Boy Scout. I'm going to prepare as well as seek to predict a little bit.
All right. So lesson one is be prepared either way it goes.
Yeah, and really, in my 4 pillars class, in my introductory class, the thing I try to communicate, whether it's effective or not, I don't know, but I do my best to say, a job mentality is one where we're seeking surety. I know what my job is, I know who my boss is, I know what my tasks are, and I know what my paycheck will be. And there's a rat race we run that, barring being unemployed, we kind of have that rat race where we're like, okay, I know, at least I know what's going to happen. And there's a surety. If I were to go to a job interview and they were to discuss tasks, one of the questions we discuss is salary, right? What's going to happen? Well, if you took that mentality in the stock market and say, well, Andy, how much one of the questions I get often is, how much money should I look to make here? I go, somewhere between a couple of $1 billion and losing everything you have, just somewhere in that range. Because it's an entirely, can everyone just pause for a moment and appreciate that context, that there's a different mentality to investing. A lot of people wouldn't invest in a syndication in a multi-unit, multi-family apartment complex in Texas because they've heard of horror stories like this. And, we'll take a hit. Coronavirus in real estate, they said, we're not going to pay rent now because you can't evict us. Welcome to being an investor. I don't know that Robert hasn't lost money in investing. I think he has, But we believe that over the long term, it's still a better life, it's still a place to go, living with those inconsistencies. So you cannot batten down every hatch. You cannot get away from risk entirely. We can only seek to management and prepare. So the first message I would try to drive home with every bit of clarity I could summon is, if you're trying to find an emotional space of surety, then you're never going to get there. You're chasing your tail. You will get paralysis of analysis, because I don't get there. You tune into me getting advice. I'm not there either. I do probably as much analysis as the average person or better, and I still don't know what's going to happen. So let's start with this. Let's accept that the defining characteristic of the weather is unpredictability. Therefore, being sure about the weather, if we seek to be sure about the weather, we're setting ourselves up for a grave disappointment, because we're trying to fly with our arms instead of a plane. In the same breath, if we just decide and accept that the defining characteristic of markets is unpredictability, then we can have some sanity and some serenity in accepting something we can't change. And now let's focus on what we can do, which is preparation.
Okay, you gave in every analogy you gave right there, you gave possibilities.
Yes.
So what would the possibilities be in the market? Like, what are the two opposing forces?
Let's talk about two of them that might make a lot of sense in the biggest picture possible. I think that if we were to bring up three charts, here's the three charts I would show, and we can do it vocally. We don't need to show it. Is the first chart I would show would be a chart of money supply. And I would say we've printed, I think you referenced an article that, one out of every $5 we've got right now has come in probably the last, what, 5 years?
The last year.
Last year. Yeah, well, we've gone from what, 17 to probably 22, 23. So it's like 20, like 1 out of 5, 1 out of $6 came in last year.
That's nuts.
Yeah, so that's a huge increase. So that would be a storm cloud in the paralysis of analysis to say, okay, that's inflationary, and that's huge inflationary pressure. Okay, so there's one. Okay, and we'd see that chart going straight up and say, oh my gosh, it's just huge.
Okay, to dumb it down for me, what you're saying is the government's printing of money is inflationary, and right now we're seeing a lot of printing of money.
Yeah, abundance it lowers value, right? And so that means that if my dollar isn't worth as much as it used to be, because there's so many of them everywhere, prices can get higher. And you've seen some inflation. You've seen some inflation in the stock market, and you've seen some inflation in the real estate market. Asset prices have inflated. Why? Well, there's an abundance of money. If you can finance things, think about student loans. Let's say that 50% of students could afford to go to school, either through their own savings, their willingness to work, or mommy and daddy pay for it. Let's say it's their own savings, their willingness to work through college, mom and daddy pay for it. Well, we don't like that. That's only getting 50% of people in college, let's say. All right, what if we offer student loans and grants? Now money's abundant. Well, what's going to happen to the demand for college now? Now you gotta lie to get into USC and get a special broker to get your rich, your famous son or daughter into USC, right?
Right.
And the tuitions go where?
Sky high.
So student loans enabled demand for school, and up go the prices. So you can see that if there's an abundance of money and everyone can borrow it at interest rates that are almost nothing, well, now it's kind of like back in the year 2008, 2007, 2006, 2005, 4, 3. Well, let's just buy a house with a zero down. If you can get a zero down, which means you have to have no money, zero down, no doc, which means you don't have to have any documentation about your income, stated income, meaning I just say it and they take my word for it. You go zero down, stated income, no doc loans. Well, everyone can get a loan now. Everyone can buy a house now. Construction, everything's going to go up because there's more money. Well, if we were alchemists and we made gold, if we figured out a way to make gold synthetically, like Rumpelstiltskin, we could spin straw into gold. Gold would lose its value too because it'd be abundant. Things that are abundant on the supply and demand curve, things with huge supply, lower, are less valuable. Well, right now we have a huge money supply. So I don't know if that I don't think that's dumbing it down. I think that's raising everyone up to understand it.
Right.
I think it is. Now, the second line I'd talk about, though, is we could certainly identify inflation in the stock market for sure. I mean, the asset prices that are, it's just like the GameStop crap. It wasn't because there was an underlying value and income of the company. It's just money being poured in, supply and demand, right? So money, where are you going to put it? Well, put it in the stock market, up it goes. So while the fundamentals, probably in my opinion, I haven't seen a lot of research for the overall growth. Certainly there's individual companies that have justified that growth. But yeah, there's been inflation in assets. Now, consumers, the consumer price index, and all kinds of things we consume, whether it's in the index or not, food, clothing, shelter, medicine, housing, oil, gas, all the stuff we consume. They have a consumer price index that does include everything, but they use it as a baseline. It's gone up, like steadily, but if you compare it to the money supply, it's almost flat. Very, and if anything, very consistently to the upside slightly. I mean, it really is like this, if I can do that visually. It's one's at maybe a 60-degree angle and one's at like a 2% grade. It's just flat. So why is that? Why can we have all this money printed and stable prices for the consumer? How's that happen?
Can I give you a guess here?
Yeah.
Is it because all the money goes to the rich and they're not eating more, but they're buying more investments?
That's absolutely, part of that's absolutely true, is where the rich spend their money. They're spending on real estate, stocks, assets, assets. And so absolutely, if the money is flowing to the rich, some of it'll stick. Warren Buffett's got a lot of cash. Think about Apple. If we send out a government check, or there's a lot of inflationary things, debt is inflationary, money printing is inflationary, government subsidies are inflationary, lowering taxes is inflationary because it makes money more abundant. So if you're Apple and you've got how many 100 billion tucked away in Ireland, you're not going to repatriate that because you'd rather do a bond at 6% or 5% and borrow that money and repay it back at 6% or 3 or 2 with these low interest rates than you would repatriate that money and pay a 35% tax, right? So yeah, you're right. There's money that gets spent by the rich in places, but there's also money that sticks, like with Apple. Buffett's living on a load of cash right now, ready to pounce when things drop. So if you were to look at a balloon, let's say we have a nice big red balloon and it just looks steady, it's the consumer prices. It's just full and it's steady. It's not expanding. It's not contracting. It's just steady. And you say, oh, things are good. They're steady. But if we turn that balloon around and look at the other side, we'd probably see a gaping hole with air going out and a huge pump plugged in to put air going in. And that the pressure stabilization is because for every bit of air going out, we're pumping in at the same rate, and gives that illusion of, well, it's not illusion, it is stability. It's just not the type of stability we think with a closed system. It's an open system. So let's talk about another graph. If I brought up, Jim Rickers talks about this a little bit. This is one of the areas, we don't agree on everything, but one of the areas I do agree with Jim is that gross domestic product is a function of velocity of money. Meaning that it's not just how much there is, but how's it moving. Obviously, money moving into stocks makes stocks go up. Money moving into real estate makes real estate go up. So you create a bunch of money and move it into someplace, it does go up. But right now, there are a lot of deflationary pressures. It's like an arm wrestle, right? Where we've got this big, well, I can't show my bicep. Greg, show yours. You got this big Greg Arthur bicep wrestling on one side and a big Greg Arthur bicep on the other. It's kind of even.
So wait, your biceps here are inflation versus deflation?
Yeah, they really are. One is fighting the other, like that balloon, right? One's letting air out and one's putting air in. One is dumping water into the boat, the other's bailing it out. So if we had one guy in the boat taking water in and out from the outside to the inside on one end of the boat, he's bailing water in, the other guy's bailing water out. You know, a boat that's floating there should just have two guys enjoying a couple of beers maybe and a fishing rod. But if one guy was bailing water into the boat and the other guy's bailing water out of the boat, and one guy speeds up and the other guy has to speed up, now we've got a really interesting system. That's what I see, is that the consumer price staying afloat, but we got people bailing water in and bailing water out, air in, air out, arm wrestling, whatever you talk. We got two forces battling each other. So deflationary forces.
Let's talk about those.
Technology, number one. If you develop a self-driving car, you will replace drivers. If you have a kiosk at McDonald's, you replace order takers. If you have Amazon.com, you're going to replace mall retail workers. And those systems are extremely automated and efficient, right? If you have drones delivering things and UPS, it just is deflationary. So unemployment is deflationary. So coronavirus, it would make sense that with drastic drop in employment, which is deflationary, you'd print a bunch of money, which is inflationary, to counterbalance that. And the modern monetary theorists, they don't believe in having a balloon that's sealed. They believe in keeping that balance. Well, we can pump as much air as air's in abundance. Air is free. We can pump as much air as we want. And if there's deflationary pressure, we'll just pump more air in. If there's too much inflationary pressure, we'll quit pumping. We don't have to pump money in. That's the MMT idea, is we have total control over this. Scary. And they believe it is predictable, which again breaks that rule. They're very sure, which I think is very dangerous for anyone to be sure. Another thing that is deflationary is velocity of money. If I am working at a movie theater and I'm the guy that punches your ticket, or I serve you the popcorn, or whatever it is that I do, change the reel, and they say, look, no more movies. We were wearing masks, no more movies, you're shut down. What am I going to do with my money? Well, I'm going to save it, right? All of a sudden, money becomes valuable, right? It becomes scarce. And so for me personally, now money is scarce. And so I hoard it, I budget it. I'm not going to spend on luxuries anymore. I'm going to save as much as I can. That's deflationary. And notice that money velocity stops or slows, because now maybe I don't put my kids in piano lessons. And so that money stops flowing. And maybe now we don't go out to dinner as much. And so that money stops flowing. And maybe now we look at all the little extras, instead of a big Christmas, we have a small one, and money stops flowing. That's deflationary, because money's valuable now. There doesn't seem to be enough of it around. So on one side, I think this is kind of, I hope this speaks to our viewer who had the question, is like, I see some storm clouds that say inflation. I see others that say deflation. I think I'm as concerned about deflation as inflation. Robert really believes in inflation. I think I think it's totally, we could have deflation as well, because if not, the consumer price index would have blown up by now. Asset prices certainly have. He's certainly proven absolutely correct in asset prices. Investors and the rich are getting richer, poor middle class getting squeezed out, rich are getting richer. Concentration of wealth going to the rich, massive inequality. It's unfortunate. So you have to decide, where do you want to play as an individual, right? Do you want to buy assets and enjoy the inflation part and benefit your family, or no? It's tough, a tough environment. So I see the arm wrestle. Well, some people are saying inflation. Well, if it's so strong, how come it hasn't beat the deflation yet? How come it hasn't? There must be an equal and opposing force deflation-wise if we have massive pressures inflation-wise. It's the reason I'm sitting on this chair, is as much as I'm pushing against the ground is pushing against me, and that's why I don't move. There are forces both ways pushing against each other to create that stalemate.
All right, can I just, I don't think you knocked out the analysis paralysis here.
Okay.
I think if anything, Stephan's like, holy cow.
Now I have even more.
Yeah. So can we shift it a little bit to the solution? Like, what can Stephan do here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answers are myself. I have the same frustration as Stephan, but I'll tell you how I think about it. And maybe I don't give advice, but it might help other people think about it, more clearly,
Yeah,
perhaps.
let's get Stefan off the ledge here.
Yeah, here, let's get him off the edge here, and maybe I can maybe I can get myself off the ledge. So
Deal.
when I look at deflation, I ask myself, what is scarce? Well, if deflation is scarce, it's going to be cash, right? And so having a store of cash is a really nice thing if there's deflation. Now I know cash is trash because we say, well, why would we save something that is printed out of nothing? And I don't think cash flows. I don't think it's like an asset. When I look at Warren Buffett and Apple and all those, if I was going to be prepared, I'd have a small amount of cash, like an emergency fund, not like I'm just going to buy cash. I'm just going to hoard cash. That's a stupid idea. Anyone with a financial statement out of all cash, you're going to get killed if inflation wins. But if deflation wins, having some cash will be to your benefit. I think you look at Warren Buffett's portfolio and the amount of cash he has. I think you look at Apple and the amount of cash they have. They've got a little resource in case that deflation arm wrestle wins, because they know it's unpredictable and either one could go. The depression of 1929, the crash and the 30s depression, was high unemployment and people couldn't get money. There was still the same amount of money in the system there was in 1928, same amount of money in the roaring 20s, and still the same amount of money. It just concentrated in the pockets of the rich a little bit, and no employment, so I needed cash. And that's where bread lines and food lines come from, because they needed cash. On the inflationary side, we have Zimbabwe, we have Venezuela, we have Peru, we have Argentina, Mexico. We have dozens upon dozens of examples of hyperinflation. So for that, I think three things. I think number one is gold. And so again, I don't go all into gold. See, the mentality of being sure, say, I know it's inflation, I'm going all gold. That's not a preparatory inflation. I said, look, I'm gonna have a little bit of gold. And notice my balance sheet would balance that way. If I have some cash and some gold, if the cash loses value, the gold should increase, I'm the same, I've balanced. If the opposite happens, I'm the same, I'm balanced. And so I'm trying to balance my balance sheet. Another one is Bitcoin. And I've had to force myself to learn about Bitcoin. Gold is not something that is man-made. Bitcoin is, straight up. It was made by a man, and if it was made by the man, it could be changed by a man. And they'll say, well, we're not going to make any more after a certain amount of, well, they've said that about every other currency in the world, right? And they say, well, if they ever did start printing at the end of Bitcoin, well, they said that about the dollar in Bretton Woods, didn't they? And blah, blah, blah. So there's always someone that will say, but this time it's different. When Bitcoin runs a course, obsolescent risk with Bitcoin, which could also happen with gold. But I'm going to have some gold. I'm going to have some Bitcoin, and I'm going to have some food. Because if we inflate, this is what's really interesting. If we hyperinflate or inflate, food gets expensive. Consumer prices get expensive. Housing gets expensive. And so having food is, I went to the grocery store during coronavirus. I couldn't get toilet paper. I couldn't get flour, Cherville Bell. I could have all the freaking money in the world and all the gold actually in the world, no food. And so having a little bit of food, not like a prepper in a bunker that's, got 20 machine guns lining the wall, but just common sense preparation, Boy Scout stuff. Food, clothing, medicine, gold, Bitcoin. So if I have both of those and I invest in both, people are so worried about taking a hit. Well, my real estate's taken a hit. We had a problem in Texas, that cash flow's gone down. Yeah, but premiums are higher than ever been in the stock market, and business is better than it's ever been. So while real estate's down, business is up, and stocks are up. But maybe if business dies down, well, then maybe real estate's up. So diversification is not well-diversified stock portfolio, it's asset class diversification.
So two things then. You're talking about really insurance when you're talking about gold, and you're talking about money. And then the second thing is,
don't leave that point you've made too quick, Gregley. Don't too quickly, Greg. too Gregly quick. Don't leave that point too quickly, Greg. I'm not looking at these small portions of money and gold and Bitcoin as investments to get rich. I am looking at them with the same attitude. Look, do I have surety that I won't get in a wreck? Well, I can research the car and I can look at its history and I can say it's rated number one, but I still can't come to that place of surety we talked about earlier, which is, well, I'll never get in a wreck now. I'm going to buy insurance. So these investments have the purpose of hedging, not the purpose of cash flow. Cash flow shouldn't change. If I invest in real estate and I do it wisely, I should be able to deal with fluctuations. If I'm running it too hot, deflation is going to kill me. If I'm not running it hot enough, I'm not going to make as much money. So it's Goldilocks there. That's pretty bad. We're an overgrown Boy Scout that reads Goldilocks and Flee Bears.
So originally we talked about capital gains and cash flow. You're really talking about cash flow as a safer than capital gains, because capital gains is predicting the future. If you do your cash flow right, it can be successful in deflation.
I think it's less aggressive, and I think it's more steady. In coronavirus, we had some real estate renters that said, we're not paying. We had a lot that said, yeah, we are. So it was fine. I would look at it 3 categories. When I invest, I think, is this a cash flow play where my investment generates new money? Is it a capital gains play where the investment goes up or down in price? Or is it a hedging or insurance play where I'm really just buying it to balance something else out to keep things balanced? And learning those things I think it helps a person get away from trying to predict the future all the time, to become a person that says, okay, I'm going to do my research. And when I see that arm wrestle back and forth, I won't get frustrated. I'll say, okay, this is actually insightful. This reader says, I've seen a lot of inflationary things, a lot of deflationary things. Looks like a deadlock. Maybe I prepare for either one to win. Maybe I predict to where I can. Now, if I walk in, I'm 6'8", 200 whatever pounds I am, and there's this little tiny guy on the basketball court, you're betting on Andy. But if the other guy's 6'8" and comparable age, comparable size, well, better prepare for both. Don't bet on one or the other. The dumbest thing you could do in a Super Bowl that's evenly matched is bet, right? Don't just hedge it. Prepare for an outcome that's satisfactory for either. But if it's David and Goliath, you usually ought to bet on Goliath. But David always has a shot.
We do have to wrap this up. So
yeah, great discussion, though.
If we were helping Stephan out, we'd say first hedge, and then
first learn.
Okay, fair enough.
That's your greatest asset is your education. First, learn what we've talked about today. The thing that there can be a stalemate, there can be conflicting information. The first thing for Stephan is to say, okay, I'm going to get away from seeking that place of surety because it doesn't exist. I'm going to get away from that. That'll get you off the ledge right there. I'm going to accept the unpredictability. I'm going to go with preparation. I think that'd be first.
Okay. And is it safe to say second, and it's not a surety, but investing for cash flow is probably the safest from a risk management standpoint, where in either way, deflation or inflation, you can profit? Come on, I'm putting you on the spot here.
We're
the end of the show, you got to pick one.
We're trying to force that in a little bit, and it's kind of not really the issue because cash flow can be every bit as risky as capital gains.
Every bit?
Every bit.
So then the answer to Stephan is,
well,
other than hedging,
the answer to Stephan is, we can make a good edit here. So the answer to Stephan is to understand 3 things. Sometimes we invest for cash flow. That's to get out of the rat race. Now, is that less risky than anything else? Absolutely not. What manages your risk better than anything else there is your financial IQ. There's people like Kenny that can go into cash flow, but it's his education that manages his risk. A lot of people go invest for cash flow to get their butts kicked. So risk management is a function of your education, the asset class. So when you're going for cash flow, that is to protect yourself again. Like if I had a job, my gosh, I could lose it tomorrow and I'm nothing. But if I have a service and a product where I can compete in the marketplace, my risks are entirely different. So I love the idea that a cash flow strategy, I think overall is much less risky than the safe, secure job that can end immediately. So that's what the cash flow investments are for. Capital gain stuff is more speculative. I think that's the least easy to do. You can certainly hedge them and take the risk off with exits and hedges, but it's just so hard to guess. And that's the one that leads you to looking for that surety most of the time. And then the third one is your hedges, where you take what you have that's existing. Like if I have a house, the hedge is insurance. If I have cash, the hedge is gold. If I have gold, the hedge is cash. If I worry about both those, I have Bitcoin as the hedge. And so it's cash flow, a certain effort there, hedging, a certain effort there. And if you have a little extra fund money, then you can play for some capital gain. I don't like the capital gain as much, not because it's less risky, it's just harder to be successful in. They all have risk.
Oh, sure. That, like you said, surety is not a thing.
Yeah.
But you did make a good point, which I think you've made on the show before. First, education. That's the best hedge you're going to get.
It really is. I mean, I think knowing how to deal with, like, you don't get sucked into the GameStop stuff that way. You kind of have an idea of preparation where you're a little bit more prepared that way. I just think it sounds kind of crazy. It sounds kind of obvious that the person that knows more about it will probably do better.
Sure.
That sounds obvious, but a lot of people miss it. They're looking for advice rather than looking to learn.
All right, Andy. Well, I think we should wrap this show up. And speaking of education, I like to end the show every time with Andy does have some free education, some free webinars you can watch in the show notes. So thanks, everybody get your education there. That's your best hedge. And Stephan, I hope this show helped you.
Thanks, Steph, and everyone else. We'll see you next time.
Thank you all. Bye.